Yes, this channel actually does do NFL content now. I know it's been a lot of college basketball, and now that season has ended, and it was a great end, in my opinion. But we are now back to got NBA coming up and NFL, of course, with the NFL draft. It's basically an event in itself. It's gained a ton of popularity from, just kind of what comes with it, and I'm totally on board. I totally love going through the draft speculation. These are, I think the draft is a very important thing in terms of how teams actually, obviously, build their Super Bowl futures. And I think some people don't fully realize that, but I think a good amount do, at least now, in terms of, you might not know it right now, but in a few years or so, you're going to be looking back like, oh my God, I can't believe I didn't freak out more at that pick that day with the draft. So could be a ton that happens, obviously, with any given draft, especially this year. I think this is mostly a video to obviously show you this is a potential of what could happen. And if I were to pick something, at least in this moment, this is probably what I would do. But more so, obviously, I say giving out my early opinions on these guys. A lot of people have different opinions on some of these draft picks. As weird, it may not seem like it, but I've done a ton of research going back at least the past 2.5 months or so, since kind of college football is basically ended / during college football season. But more so, once it ended, really diving into just a ton of these prospects. So I do have a big spreadsheet that I've made, and with rankings, write-ups, all that good stuff. So I'm not just looking at someone else's thing and showing it to you in a video so that you can see me, oh, look, I'm talking just like this guy. I may agree with some people, but I've watched a lot, but researched a lot, and kind of have my own just opinions on guys anyways, in terms of kind of what I prefer. So a lot of this stuff is trying to do that. And this is also just seeing kind of what these teams do. Obviously, teams do different stuff. Some teams kind of don't really pick a lot of positions that maybe they should in the first round. Like, let's say the Seahawks with guards. Hey, yeah, it works, but now look at your interior offensive line, and maybe they'll finally do it this year. Maybe they won't. Obviously, you've seen the Packers with receivers. Sometimes it does work for sure. Sometimes it doesn't. So different teams have their styles. I'm not really taking that into account right now. I think predictive based is mainly for, let's say, right before the draft, where we have all the info and Daniel Jeremiah tells us all this stuff and all these other guys tell us everything, and we can try and predict what's going to happen. But everything leading up to it is probably, it's all just going to be, hey, these are who I think, this is how good I think this guy is, this is where I think this team should go, all that good stuff. To preface, I don't hate your team because I take a player that you don't like. That's not how that works. Don't be a moron in the comments, because I will totally expose you. I do not care at all. Had so many of those last year. I know I seem nice in the comments. You come off as a moron on this channel. Sorry, I'll try and help you if you're genuine, but if it's not, I don't know if you're going to survive that long. I'm just saying. I had a ton of them last year. And it's my opinion. Like I said, I do my own research on these guys. I have my own opinions. It's okay if you do too. But take it as, hey, maybe you could learn some more stuff about these guys as well, because I definitely can too. I'm not all-knowing about everything either. There's definitely other reporters that know more, but I've spent, I guess, compared to other people, just a ton of time just looking into a lot of these guys. And now, again, it's mostly what I would do. So we'll see kind of how this draft goes. Some may like it, some not, but we'll have more draft content out for you all the way up until the draft happens, which is coming up very soon at the end of April here. So let's go ahead and get started. It is going to be just a first-round mock. I'll have probably a 2-round mock next. So let's just go ahead and get started, as the Tennessee Titans are on the clock at number 1 overall. All right, so starting off at number 1 here, it seems more likely than not that it's going to be Cam Ward here at quarterback with the first overall pick. And I think personally they should take Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter. That would be my opinion. I think it just would be better to take the potential all-pro, perennial Pro Bowler kind of caliber player at a position of need. One of them at edge, and then I think Hunter, he's not a direct position of need in terms of maybe top 2 or 3, but playing obviously wherever you want him to, offense or defense with receiver corner, pretty premium. I think something like that. I think you just can't draft at lower positions. Whereas with quarterback, like I think at least at the top this year, yeah, maybe in a year ago or so, you wouldn't be able to get maybe some of those top tier caliber guys at the top of the draft. But this year, I just think the value of quarterback at number 1 compared to one of these guys, I really prefer kind of going the other way. Which, to be fair and honest, we're going to obviously pick him here, and I know I'm talking down on that. I'm just telling you what I would do. But for him as a prospect, like I do like Cam Ward. I think the value of him here, like I said, versus the other 2 guys, like maybe I don't prefer. But they did invest in this offensive line. They definitely need more weapons and more depth there. Will Levis has showed some highs in the past, but some very low lows, obviously. And I think Callahan, is the head coach, is definitely pushing for a QB this year because obviously he hates Will Levis so much, as you can tell. And I really don't know kind of what the head coach's leash is, to be honest. There's a brand new GM that didn't hire him here, and could he be gone after this year? It's a possibility, for sure. But if I'm the GM, if I'm Mike, I'm probably going Carter here and maybe signing Joe Flacco or something and having Will Levis on the last year as like a last chance kind of thing. And it kind of, hey, go ahead and draft more weapons in this draft, and then they can add quarterback and maybe a better quarterback draft next year at maybe a more valuable position than taking Cam Ward at number 1. But with Cam Ward here, a very hectic playmaker, I would say. He did grade as the best passer this past college season, so obviously that is a pretty good thing there. Very confident guy, if you couldn't tell by watching any of his previous interviews, which I do think is a positive at quarterback. I think media-based, obviously you're just going to have people, in the general world that obviously crap on that, but I think the confidence does help in just terms of being a leader of a football team. Sometimes maybe it comes back to bite you a little bit, but I think in general I would want my quarterback to be confident rather than not. Makes all the throws at a lot of different angles. If you watch, leaning off to the side, everything like that, does all that. He was down in games a lot this year in terms of Miami was, so he had to come back a ton. So he had a lot of comeback wins. Specifically, I would be looking at in the clutch. I think his overall numbers obviously look great, but that's mainly because their defense was down by so much in so many parts in games. And but he did, deliver. There were some games where he had a lot of picks, but that's just because you're having so many attempts. He obviously, I think sometimes he does a little too much. It's kind of your general like young quarterback thing, like the guys you see running around. We've had super successors like a Kyler Murray. We've had super failures like a Johnny Manziel, but that's kind of what you envision. Just not obviously the hectic playmaker that Manziel was, nor the mindset or situation. But I think his stats do show that he had a very high turnover-worthy play percentage. So definitely some throws that could have easily been picks that you could have also easily avoided. But he will be a starter in the NFL. I think that's kind of what he's going to be. He will be a starting caliber quarterback in the NFL, not because he's going to be a quarterback drafted to the Tennessee Titans, but because he will be one of the 32 best quarterbacks in the NFL, or a team will be wanting for him to start and be a starting quarterback, and they will be fine with it. I think the investments in the offensive line are going to help a lot, but I think the weapons are going to need to be added to this roster. I don't think Calvin Ridley and Chikakonkwo at tight end, like you got to add more. You really do. And I think this draft they probably will. Haven't really done that a ton in free agency, to be honest, but I think for this specific position, it's not what I would do, but I get it. And the odds are that it's going to happen. So that's why we're going to just stick with it, have Cam Ward there. That's probably what's going to be, so definitely get used to that. Number 2 with Cleveland, I am actually going to go with Abdul Carter. If it's not if it's not Cam Ward at number 1, which it probably is, he is definitely going to go here. So Cam Ward is going to be a top 2 pick. And I think if it is, between Carter and Hunter, it's honestly kind of a toss-up. In my opinion, I would probably go Carter here. That's probably what I would do. In terms of quarterback, I think making some kind of trade at quarterback, like Kirk Cousins, as you've kind of seen, and maybe taking like an actual blue chipper here in Abdul Carter, compared to like drafting a Shedeur Sanders here at number 2, which is probably the next thing that people are thinking. Hey, why don't you draft Shedeur Sanders here? trading for Kirk Cousins, having him for a year with the other guys that you have, and then looking at quarterback next year when you're in a much better position in a better quarterback class. I know number 2 is like, oh my God, this is a great position to take a quarterback. Well, not every class is the same. And so it definitely, in my opinion, the value of maybe trading for someone and then taking Carter or Hunter here as a guaranteed guy, rather than drafting Sanders at number 2, and then you can't sign, you can't sign a Carter or Hunter out of nowhere. You got to hope you draft him down low, which you could already do that by doing this, position, taking Carter here. You still got all your picks. I just think this is so much better value. He has the production, has the size, speed, traits, was an outside linebacker, played edge rusher this year, got even better throughout the year, which you love to see is just improvement throughout the year for a guy that's already been super good. I do think is number 1 pick worthy. So as I said, number 2, not reaching at all there. I don't think anyone thinks that. But he's a perfect blend of production with your ideal size and traits. Whoever gets him, I think is just going to be really happy. They are. And I think with them having Myles Garrett, it doesn't mean that you can't have Abdul Carter. That's not how that works. Like, you can have 2 of these guys on the field because there's always going to be 2 of these edge rushers on the field and even more pass rushing. I think if it is Hunter, I'm still totally fine with that. I would be very happy if I'm a Browns fan if I take any one of these guys. And the only reason I, am not doing it is just because of, I think, the value of Carter there at edge rusher. But I think Hunter, I'm not arguing that. Totally fine. Need receiver help. Cornerback help, they're relatively, I'd say solid with, but they don't have, I guess you could say, 3 100% starters that you're fine with in a nickel defense, which I think people are kind of underrating how many times defense have to go into the nickel with how pass-heavy the offense is obviously becoming in the NFL. And then we have number 3, and I think this one you're definitely thinking we're going to go quarterback here. No, I'm not. I'm going Travis Hunter with the Giants here. Here's the thing. We know the Giants front office and head coach are on their last leg, basically. They're on the final leash. But I'm sorry, I'm just not taking a Shedeur Sanders here. When you signed Russell Wilson, signed Jameis Winston, and then if you take Shedeur Sanders here, you're just throwing a bunch of darts at the wall and just hoping one sticks. I mean, that's really what they're doing if they do that. For a final, regime here. And then if that doesn't work, a new regime is going to come in. Do they like Sanders? We have no idea. We're going to have no clue. So, I think just the idea of is Sanders good enough to totally overcome and be like, yes, he's totally worth it and he saves our jobs? I really don't know, and I personally would say no, in my personal opinion. I could be wrong. Obviously, I personally don't think so. I don't think they would have got Winston and Wilson just for one of them to be QB3. I know they have Tommy DeVito, but I think they can kind of cut him at any point if they wanted to. But even just looking at their situation, their offensive line is bottom 5, which for a rookie Shedeur Sanders just will not work at all. Hunter is the best player available for sure, not even close. I mean, maybe relatively with Genti, but the value of him and just what he can do, it's not close personally. I know they have a solid defensive back situation that they really poured into, but I think it's pretty easy to see where he would fit into this. It's almost better because he's not 100% needed at cornerback, and in this case, he would probably be more of a wide receiver than defensive back, but he can still play both of them. I think that would be perfect here. I think betting on Deonte Banks for the Giants, a first-round pick they took last year, defensive back, to 100% fill the position that he should be for as a first-round pick. I think that even if you think that shouldn't stop you from taking him here. I do think I've heard a few people say this, specifically Daniel Jeremiah. He actually likes him better as a wide receiver, Travis Hunter. So it feels like he might have more of an impact playing wide receiver more, just to be able to maximize, like we said, his total impact because of what he's obviously producing on offense, while still being able to come in on, defensive, let's say, third down nickel snaps or something like that, and being capable and being a very good guy there. Again, I think this is what they should do within reason. Will they do it? Maybe not. We'll totally see, but I've seen this gaining a little more steam than some of you might think. Number 4, the New England Patriots. I feel like they have a few ways they could go, but pretty simple at the same time. I think it's offensive line. Again, I'm not just purely going based off of PFF's kind of board. Theirs is a little different, obviously, because they have their own opinions. But I do agree with Will Campbell being the best offensive lineman, and I personally, at least at this moment, would take him here, and it does seem reasonable to do that. As you've seen in other mocks, I think if Travis goes here, if Shedeur Sanders goes within pick 2, 3, or 4, obviously that's pushing down one of, or I'm sorry, not 2, 3, or 4. If he goes either 2 or 3, Shedeur Sanders, obviously one of these guys are falling, and I think that's who the Patriots should pick. Just pick one of those two. If not, I think if this is how it goes, you should go offensive line. The Patriots spent a lot in offensive line, or not in offensive line, but a lot in free agency. Offensive line is where they haven't spent a lot in. But I really like their pickups in free agency. I really do. The team is totally revamped, brand new head coach. I honestly love the direction they're going. The only other guy, like I said, if this is not Hunter or Carter, which would be a total win for the Patriots, I think Patriots fans should be rooting for Shedeur Sanders to go in one of these two spots. But if not, you should still be totally happy you're getting offensive line help. If it's not Will Campbell, I think Armand Membu is a pretty clear potential choice here, and I don't think that would be too high just because he is of need and has all the traits to be more of a guard, more of a tackle, and that's why some people are concerned about Campbell here at 4, even though I think he is definitely talent-wise, at least right now, specifically, definitely the best offensive lineman in the class. He has unfortunate arm length, and it's really, not ideal for a tackle for how long you want your arms to be, because sometimes some of you may hear that arm length is pretty important for tackle because right when the ball is snapped, obviously the offensive line are a little bit farther off, but you can't be too far back, as you've seen with the Kansas City Chiefs and some of their stuff with some people saying they go too far back or have false starts. Like, all that is to try and make up for maybe a potential lack in arm length. And if you are a tackle, having big arms helps a ton because then you can get a nice grab on the edge rusher coming off, who edge rushers are faster and stronger than ever now. So you're going to need a tackle that's basically, relatively close, but obviously stronger to, try and match up with him at the right angle as they're coming in. So the only concern with him is just the arm length, but he's very smart. He knows how to play, strong hands. If you need just an O-lineman desperately, I think you should just take him, and that's why I have the Patriots doing that, because I think they need offensive linemen desperately, and they should just take him. I think for this year, I think you could still see if he could be a tackle. I think you should probably still sign a tackle if I'm the Patriots for more depth, like a Tyron Smith, a Joe Noteboom. Both of those guys are out there. I would do that for sure. But he can try at tackle, and if it doesn't work, it's fine because he's a Pro Bowl position anywhere else. In tackle, he still could be. It's more of a concern because of his arm length. But I think this is a nice, safe addition to the offensive line for a team that looks like they're going in the right direction, and they just need to protect their quarterback because I do believe that Drake May is their franchise quarterback, and I think the rookie year that he had, there was not a lot. He tried to maximize as much as he could with what was around him, and I think he did a good job doing that, and I think you should see a big step up, especially if they help in the offensive line for year 2 for Drake May and the Patriots. The Jaguars at 5. I'm going to go ahead and go Mason Graham. You've seen everyone kind of do it, and it's because it's a very easy pick. They need help on the interior of the defensive line. Yes, the edges are fine. You might think of D-line with the Jaguars and think, oh my God, their edge rushers are great. They don't need D-line. Well, no, because they do inside the interior defensive line. But he's a great prospect. He was great last year. Insane this past year, to be honest. Smaller arm length and size than you would like, but he fell a little bit for me just as a prospect, just because of his strength and how he tested strength-wise. So I don't think he's a for sure blue chip, but I do think he's a top 10 prospect. And for Jacksonville, I think they should just take a safe player at a position of need, even if it won't be a Josh Allen level guy. I think somewhere along the lines of maybe a Pete Christian Wilkins-ish. Christian Wilkins, former Dolphin, current Raider, was injured this past year, but has had some really good stuff so far and is, kind of in his prime anyways. So I think that's maybe who Mason Graham could be. Again, just a nice, safe, good addition for Jacksonville here at 5 at a position of need. Raiders at 6. Lots of changes were made to this team, and definitely I think they still have some more to do. But the likelihood of this pick growing is, the likelihood of this pick, as I said, is growing. And I think it does make sense, and I actually do like it. And it is going to be Ashton Jeanty at number 6. They desperately need skills position help. I think this is definitely the most impactful skills position player on the board. Just an amazing prospect. The only thing is his size. He is 5'8", 211 pounds, so maybe some pass blocking issues there. But just as a player, I personally do think he's the real deal. I think he's like definitely a step above, let's say a level above, but a similar player to D'Angelo Williams and how he played, but like a step above that. So let's say D'Angelo Williams at his peak was like a top 10 for sure running back, maybe a little higher. This is a peak of, let's say, a top 5 for sure, maybe a little bit higher for Genty in terms of his, potential. Or like a peak Alvin Kamara, who basically was that, a top 5 at the bottom in terms of running back, if not higher at his peak. Except he's probably a little bit of a better runner between the tackles than Kamara, but not as much receiving as Kamara is, obviously. The offensive line for the Raiders, I think, is definitely better than people realize. I expect a lot of progression from Jackson Powers-Johnson, the offensive lineman center they took from Oregon last year. I really liked him in that draft. In 2023, I know they have Geno Smith now, quarterback. For that specific, player in 2023, which is 2 years ago, he was the second best quarterback in play action. Geno Smith was. And I think a running back that just had 375 attempts in one collegiate season this past year is surely going to help Geno get some pretty good play action attempts. And obviously, in terms of the kind of Geno that we've known these past 2 to 3 years, that's definitely going to be a big plus for him, especially not having the requisite weapons that he had in Seattle. And yeah, I know the value of running back argument. I do understand that, and I agree with it for the most part. But I think there's levels to it, and I think the NFL kind of went too far, in my opinion. I think the elite halfbacks should be treated and drafted as such and should not fit the mold of what the general new age kind of team / GM or fan would think of drafting a running back high, or what we've seen. Because I think guys like Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry have clearly shown that they are much worth it. Or McCaffrey 2 years ago, they've clearly shown that it's worth it to go ahead and pursue that, especially if your offense, especially if it helps your quarterback a ton, which for the Eagles, it 1,000,000% did. And it's the reason they won a Super Bowl, was because they signed Saquon Barkley. It is. Direct reason they just won a Super Bowl. I know there's other stuff in there that helps, but how they even got there, I know he didn't have an amazing game in the game, but they wouldn't have even been there, in my opinion, if it wasn't for him. And I think that's a fact. So clearly the elite guys are worth it and do help and impact the game. It's just how long you sign them for and how their longevity is. Well, for Ashton Genty, he can absolutely be that kind of mold player, the Saquons, the Henry, in terms of their impact. So, I think at least it honestly is more likely that he'll be Saquon than he will be Leonard Fournette. 2 running backs that were drafted, both in the top. I think one of them was like 4, one of them was 2, obviously. 2 top 6 running backs picks. If you were to kind of base it off that, or your Trent Richardsons, stuff like that, I think Genty is 100% closer to Saquon than Fournette, and I don't think that's close. And I would be willing to kind of die on that. And I know it seems easy to say now, but, hey, we look back, and Fournette obviously had some good years, but wasn't an ideal pick there at that position, especially for what he ended up turning into and how long his career lasted. So for the Raiders, I think the offensive line is good, for what it has, and they don't have any running back. And I think, like I said, having a running back that can take just a ton of, they need skills position guys. This is the best impact skills position player. So I like it, and I think it fits. Jets at number 7. I am going to have them going offensive line, the next best one, and the one that could have gone number 4, and Armand Membu. I think it's essentially between 2 players, either Membu or Tyler Warren, tight end, as you've seen. I think Warren is the better overall player, but I think the value of tackle here versus tight end for the Jets is it's definitely a bigger one at tackle. Olu Fashanu, first-round pick last year. I think he's kind of the only relatively safe tackle they have on that roster, to be honest. The Jets, they should sign someone, but they're unfortunately negative $11 million in cap space right now. I think for Membu, really broke out last year, wasn't looked at as a first-round pick before, had a great year this past season, tested amazingly, athletic-wise, great athlete, Very good job getting low in his stance. That's something that's pretty key. He knows how to get down and not play too high up to where edge rushers are just going to run right past him. And he has the kind of build, I guess maybe not the 100% ideal build. It's kind of a weird build for tackle, so he might play guard, but the odds of him being tackle, I think, are higher than Will Campbell at tackle, just for a team drafting him. But I think he's definitely still going to try tackle, and I think he's, like I said, more of a tackle size than Will Campbell. I think he's kind of similar to a guy they already have on their team, and Elijah Vera Tucker can play kind of all the offensive line positions. I think one of these guys can probably play tackle, the other can play guard, and you're probably living happy. So if he's gone, I would either look at Will Campbell here, just switch him, or if they're both gone, maybe Tyler Warren here at tight end, just because of the talent. Number 8, my favorite team, the Carolina Panthers. This one has been kind of hard to do, to be honest, and I know that this player is already the consensus, and I was definitely going into this when I did research thinking I was going to have someone else. But the more I think about it and the more I go over it, the more it seems like they would do it and the more it makes sense. And the more I'm trying to buy into it as a fan. And I think I can. And that is going to be the Panthers going down here. Again, PFF's board's a little different. But it's taking Jalen Walker here at 8. I think I know he's a weird player. Because he's very hybrid, but I think he's the good kind of hybrid. I don't think this is an Isaiah Simmons 2.0 position. I don't. Could it be? Absolutely, it could. Hey, I didn't pick the Florida. I didn't pick Florida to win it all, but again, I was not stupid saying it definitely couldn't have happened at all. I just had 2 mock drafts. I had 2 tournaments that I picked in terms of brackets. I think 2 is kind of the limit, at least for me personally, and I didn't have him in one of the 2, so it easily could happen for sure. But just from what I'm kind of going based off of and kind of looking at and researching, I feel like it'd be more likely he's going to be the good version of a really good hybrid player than the bad one. He can be an edge pass rusher or an off-the-ball linebacker. Carolina runs a 3-4, so 3 guys normally up front, 4 linebackers. So I think it is just really bleak back there. Like, on the outside, edge rushing, and at linebacker, there is not a lot of just athleticism. Like, there's a high lack of athleticism there and much older. So I think having Jalen Walker fills a giant need for a good athlete. He's not the most refined, but he's not as raw as you would think with most of these players are, especially being ranked as low as he is on PFF's board. If there is some new defensive coordinator after this season, if they do make this pick, I think it helps a ton because it doesn't really, or I'm not saying it helps a ton to fire your DC, but I think it helps taking this guy if there is a new defensive coordinator because it doesn't matter who is there. I think he can honestly just fit in anything, which helps a ton. And I think you can kind of mold him into whatever you specifically want, whether you want him as kind of a Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah off-shadowing linebacker or just your hybrid like Micah Parsons edge kind of thing. Not saying he's going to be Micah Parsons, but that kind of style of player in terms of being linebacker and edge. Honestly, I think, funny enough, similarly, like I said, as a player, he's similar in terms of kind of mold and build-wise to an Abdul Carter or a Micah Parsons. A Nolan Smith is a very similar comp that was kind of just more on the raw end. Nolan Smith was. I remember when he was drafted. I loved that draft pick for the Eagles, and that's looking pretty good now. I think he's closer to a prospect of Jalen Carter or Abdul Carter. Sorry, I keep saying Jalen Carter. Thinking of the Eagles Carter, that's why. But I think in this draft, he's closer to an Abdul Carter as a player than he is to Nolan Smith. And Nolan Smith was still a first-round pick. So I feel like this kind of position, yeah, maybe 8's a little high, but for his potential, it's really not. And to be honest, if you've seen other mock drafts, I saw the Jaguars having him on some people's stuff at 5. So this might not even be there. But I do think, and again, as a Panthers fan, it is a little bit risky just because he's not a 100% guaranteed guy. But I do think they need some kind of splash on just the outside defensively. Jadeveon Clowney's like the only one, and he's obviously getting old. Maybe has 1 year left in Carolina. But I would prefer a defensive end or edge rusher here rather than addressing the offense because I would address the offense later because I think they did a pretty good job of that recently. I think wide receiver is the main thing people think of, but to be honest with this, I think you can live another year with an Adam Thielen, Jalen Coker, who I actually am happy. I liked in the draft. Like he was one of the guys I had from Holy Cross as, hey, this receiver can maybe step in, and he totally went over my expectations as being literally the wide receiver 2 for a team that, I mean, they're not great, but they're not the worst team in the NFL. And I think he's probably not going to get too much better, but he's going to be a solid, underrated guy that's probably going to be in the NFL for a good long time. And then ideally, Xavier Legette progression is what you're going to probably have. Of which I think the only wide receiver kind of worth here is McMillan, and he's basically an X, just like Xavier Legette is, very similar. So I think, and Xavier, like we said, he was literally just a round 1 prospect, and he was a round 1 pick. And as a prospect, he was going to be a more raw rookie, and it showed last year. So I really wouldn't go with some kind of offensive guy here. I think defensively, you could look at a few guys, but to be honest, the more I looked at it, Jalen Walker made the most sense for what the Panthers need, and I do kind of like that pick. Then we have number 9 here with the Saints. We are actually going to be doing our first trade. I'm going to be trading down. The team is going to be coming up is going to be the Indianapolis Colts. I'm going to have them trading. They're just going to swap 5 picks. So from 14 to 9, they're going to be giving up number 80 along with a 5th in 2026. So I know it says they're not interested, but I did it yesterday and they were. It's just PFFs. They kind of change, like, oh, some guys are interested in the pick this draft and not. I think it's a kind of a cool kind of concept they have. But we'll go ahead and force this trade through. And the Colts up at 9. I think they trade up and they go ahead and snag Tyler Warren with him falling past the Jets and the Panthers here, and go ahead and get him at number 9. The Saints trading down, I think they just have a bunch of different needs. I feel like they would be totally open and should be honestly looking to trade down. And Indianapolis, they don't trade up too much, obviously. But I think they would probably, at least ideally in my opinion, would want to secure getting Tyler Warren if he falls, which I think as teams could look to maybe trade up ahead of him or just pick him straight up. Like I think the Bears, 10 might be his floor. It might be. And even the Cowboys, is there a possibility they'd love him and take him over a wide receiver or skills position guy? Yeah, I think it is. So I do think this trade makes sense for the Colts as a team that this is his floor at 14, but even then, I don't know if it really is, because I think the odds of other teams falling in love with him might be pretty high that, the odds that the Jets, Panthers, Bears, Cowboys, none of those teams, like, actually fall in love and just one of them has to kind of take the swing, I think that's pretty low. So that's why I think I have the Colts doing a good job trading up here. But just the position and just the guy, like, he's a total stud. He is. He's a blue chipper, total stud, amazing year with improvement, best stretch during like the last 7 games, including the college football playoff. Like, he was amazing, completely owned the middle of the field, had a ton of forced missed tackles after the catch, which I think you really love too. He was second in the country in forced missed tackles. Anthony Richardson absolutely needs some type of just God-tier saving tight end or a potential to reach that to help with his development while also having some type of success for them to actually want to stay invested. I mean, there were times where obviously I think Colts fans may be looking at it too, like, how invested are we in this player? And is he even good enough for the coach to want to keep him on the field so that he doesn't think he's just going to lose his job by putting all of his, eggs into one basket, being the Anthony Richardson basket, and it maybe not working out. So I think getting Tyler Warren helps both of those things, and obviously you get another skills position guy, which I think with having Downs, Pittman, and Warren, that's a very good trio with Jonathan Taylor back there. Totally helps Richardson. I think, again, it helps him a ton, helps him progress, but it also maybe gives you an insight of, okay, if we have all these guys and he can't do it, maybe we feel more comfortable moving in a different direction after a year or two. And the comparison for him, he is kind of like a Greg Olsen, maybe like a more versatile Pat Freiermuth. That's kind of what I've seen him as. The Bears at number 10. Haven't seen a lot of people go with this, and maybe some people would tell you not to. But I'm honestly going to do it. I'm just going to go Jahad Campbell here at 10. This is kind of a really hard team to pick for, but I do like the fit here. Chicago obviously changed a lot. I definitely think for the better. I would look at edge rusher here, but I think that, I know that maybe feels better just because of the position value, but I think that would be maybe better for them on day 2, along with a potential halfback. But I don't really know if they should take Hampton here. I really don't think they should do that. I think waiting day 2 would be much better there. So just the value there could be an edge rusher here, but I much prefer getting edge and running back in day 2, and then just looking at guys in the value here at number 10 of maybe guys you couldn't get in day 2 in terms of just if there's a giant drop-off. And in my opinion, there is one, and that's Jahad Campbell. He can play Sam linebacker, strong side linebacker for them, which is what they need in their 4-3 defense. He's the ideal linebacker build, had a really good senior year, very balanced linebacker prospect. He was a former edge rusher, so he has those kind of skills there to be able to rush the passer. Again, still has pass rushing traits and is doing a good job developing at linebacker, and had kind of an outbreak season this year of putting it all together. Had great athletic testing, which I think is the biggest reason why I'm comfortable having him at 10. Tested athletically just great, which is probably why he was a former edge rusher. And he's just raved about for his character and leadership, which I think is obviously very ideal for a linebacker prospect. Linebackers, like we said, they aren't I don't think the linebackers they have are like the Bears have are going to stop them from taking Jahad Campbell, because I know in taking a guy like this, you kind of really need a need there. And in my opinion, the linebackers they have don't prioritize or give enough for you to say, okay, yeah, we're totally fine just skipping over this position with this player right here. Again, I know the potential positional value, but it's a need that they have, and I think the player is worth the talent at the spot. They had some of the worst coverage linebackers this year, and Jahad Campbell's speed is 100% going to help with that. So we're gonna go him there. Any Bears fans, let me know what you think about that pick. I don't know how many times you've seen that, but I wouldn't worry about maybe if you want to get value, you can. I think any fan of a team here always says trade down, you can get this guy. It's like, well, you don't know what teams are going to do and what they're going to pick, and it's all got to make sense. And even on draft night, some of them don't really make a lot of sense. We've seen that before. So this is trying to make at least the most sense of stuff. And again, we're not in the building. We don't know what rumor has it that this team loves this guy. I don't think anyone knew Michael Penix was going to go to the Falcons. I definitely didn't. Big surprise for the whole world. So that's kind of what goes down there. So this is trying to make sense of everything and put it in a draft that actually makes sense. 49ers at 11. Could be O-line or maybe more so D-line. But I am going to go Jahadae Barron here. I think Barron is just so good, and they definitely need another cornerback. Renardo Green was a good find out of Florida State last year in the draft. I did like him, and he has actually been much better than I thought just immediately. And that was a great find for them. Diamador Lenore they have, but that's kind of it. And in 2025, again, I think you really need more than that. I really like teams that have deep secondaries, because I think weak secondaries are just not ideal. And just I think it's a plus that both cornerback and just for the Niners trying to decide to pick, I think it's a plus for them that both corner and defensive line are deep in day 2 this year. So I think what you can do is just say, okay, if we're going to get one of those two guys, which one's the best in round 1? And I think at this point, the best available would be Barron at corner. So that's kind of a simple reason why I think they should go him here. I think he arguably had the best year of any cornerback this past season. Great production, one of the highest coverage grades according to PFF. He's played both slot and outside corner. Is a bit smaller, but it doesn't really show, to be honest. He kind of feels like Trent McDuffie, who I loved coming out of Washington in the draft, and the Chiefs were able to get him in the first round later than I thought. And he was almost a complete prospect. It was just he might be having to play slot a little bit more than expected. But again, teams run receivers out a trio receiver all the time. They do it so much more than often. So I think nickel corners, again, I love teams with very deep secondaries, and I really want teams to get there. And if this guy is just a total stud and he falls because of his size and maybe he's not going to be a full-time outside corner, I just don't really think that makes sense in my opinion. Yeah, sure, more more wide receiver ones will be playing outside, but there's a lot of really good wide receiver ones that are slots right now, especially in their division being Puka Nacua. So I think getting Jahdae Barron there, especially when they need help, is a good pick. The Cowboys at 12. Look, obviously they want halfback here, but in this position where Genty probably won't be there anymore, and I think unless obviously they trade up, which they could do, I think the way they look, I personally wouldn't go another running back at 12. I'm going to go McMillan here at 12. I say, hey, with him still here, why not just take him? I mean, the Cowboys offense, they just cannot, and it's why I was against them last year, they just cannot succeed with only one real weapon with the team that they have. And the quarterback they have, the offensive line they have, they cannot succeed with one real weapon in CeeDee Lamb. They just won't, especially without, like I said, the star offensive line that they once had, or even like a solid offensive line. Or I guess you could just say good. Maybe they have a solid right now. Even without a good offensive line, I don't think they can succeed, at least the way they want to. Kevontae Turpin is your slot. Having traded for Jonathan Mingo from the Panthers, that's not stopping you from taking him. Having Jalen Tolbert as your wide receiver 2, I think should absolutely not stop you from taking him here. And I think when you look at when the Vikings took Jordan Addison in the first round when they had Justin Jefferson, it's because you can't just have one star weapon. Yes, one of them can be absolutely better, but I think having another guy that is total starter quality, especially at a wide receiver 2, is very big and honestly maybe needed. And I think this helps a ton as Dak just isn't defaulting to the number one outside wide receiver that he trusts in CeeDee Lamb, because there was just a ton of over-reliance on CeeDee Lamb last year when the defense could also just double him, and he still was throwing his way, I remember, especially earlier in the season. But just for McMillan himself, he's a big body monster. Even when he's covered, he's open, almost unfair in man coverage. Great size, really good route runner for his size, amazing after the catch for what, again, his size kind of entails. His speed is kind of the only thing, but he has shown that he does have very good skill in trying to get extra yards after the catch. I don't think this is some like big body Kenny Galladay 2.0 position. I think he's kind of shown a lot more versatility, and I think he's much closer to like a Nico Collins or Drake London than he is some kind of Kenny Galladay bust. I definitely feel that way. So different pick. Maybe it's gotten a little hot, but I do actually like it here when I just went through it myself personally with the Cowboys going McMillan here. 13 with the Dolphins. I think if Jahdae Barron is here, I actually do like that for them. But I don't think it's being talked about enough how poor the interior looks here as well, or just the offensive line in general. But it was either tackle or defensive interior for me, because I think the interior of both the offensive and defensive line are not 100% ideal. Some, I think it's maybe one's a little better than others. In terms of, I think maybe the interior offensive line is better than the interior defensive line, although the interior defensive line does have the best starter. So, again, just know both aren't amazing or ideal, but I think the tackle here is, like, the best available tackle is better than the best available interior defensive lineman. And in that case, I'm going to go ahead and go Kelvin Banks Jr. here for the Dolphins. It's, I think, going to be Banks over Simmons for me. You see Josh Simmons here at 17. And that purely comes down to Miami is probably going to prefer a guy that doesn't need maybe a little bit of time coming off a major injury, which Simmons does, because they are going to need a guy to start. They obviously have a little bit of depth, but I think the two injuries that the two guys that they have are normally injured, Austin Jackson, Larry Borum, and then one of them was obviously a 34-year-old Teron Armstead, who is now retired. When I made this pick, I actually had Kelvin Banks, but I wasn't sure. And then I saw Armstead retired, and now I feel way more confident about it being offensive line here for them at 13. Banks is kind of like similar, like your Elijah Vera Tucker, Peter Skronsky. He can play tackle or guard, just going to have to kind of fill in wherever or whatever the worst spot is for the Dolphins. He doesn't have the major arm length concerns that Will Campbell does, but it's still not 100% like, yeah, he's 1,000,000% a good tackle. Like, it just depends on where he's going to play. But he's a very ideal pass blocker, which I think fits Miami a ton because obviously they like to use a lot of quick. Obviously the passing game kind of sets up the running game, and so that's why they get all those big explosive runs with the zone run because, they got Tua dropping back a little bit, or not really dropping back, but catching already in the shotgun and just getting it out in a few seconds. You want a guy that's pretty quick up there and can at least help keep as little pressure on Tua as possible, which I think Kelvin Banks would do that as a primary pass blocker. Run blocking, maybe you're going to have to run in the middle a lot more, away from his side, at least in the beginning. But passing, which is the biggest thing that they have, because a lot of money that they have invested there, I think this would be a good pick for them. The Saints at 14 now, we're not going to have them trade back down, but we actually will go ahead and take quarterback. We will go Shedeur Sanders for them at 14. I do prefer this, where you get some actual value while still taking Shedeur Sanders at a position that I much prefer. Yes, I know realistically the odds that he goes higher are definitely probably better, but I don't think it's as high as you would really think. It could happen, but just on an odds perspective, I don't think it's like a total guarantee he's going to go in the top 5 or 3 or number 2. His kind of athletic size and profile, I think, limits his upside, in my opinion. He is a good processor. He's consistent. He takes too many sacks sometimes, but he is objectively accurate. His arm is fine, but it does kind of limit some plays in terms of his arm strength. He only really throws if they're kind of open. He doesn't anticipate as much as you would hope, which just for me personally is kind of a red flag. But he's a very high floor prospect. He doesn't really love the, I guess, not saying he, I don't really love the personality or leader he seems to be. That's just my opinion. I know it might be coming off as a stupid opinion because some guys are different, and he can grow. But in my opinion, from what I've seen, I think obviously Cam Ward is not too far off, but Cam Ward as a prospect is just subjectively better. And I think with Shedeur Sanders, I just don't know if he is as good of a prospect as people think, just because he's being pushed up. And the only reason he's being pushed up is because he's a quarterback. In my opinion, depending on what team you are, obviously are in your position and what your job security is, I don't really think you need to be 100% rushing it unless you 1,000,000% need it. And, I think if you're not going to do that, at least trade down. Get value. When I'm saying when you don't 100% need it, what I mean is taking him super duper high in doing that. 14 is still relatively high, but 16 is the middle of the draft. It's at 14 and you traded down, and, realistically looking, Derek Carr has 2 years left, but it could easily be 1. If I told you Derek Carr, this was his last year on the team without taking Shedeur Sanders in this draft, I don't think you'd be surprised. I really don't think Spencer Rattler showed much of hey, let's put faith into this guy. That's my opinion. I think the roster is fine, but is it bottom 3 next year in order to get a super high quarterback? I really don't know. I don't know. I personally also love the head coach in terms of his play calling there and Kellen Moore. So with Derek Carr there, obviously as long as he's healthy, and the guys that they have, they're in this weird rebuilding kind of stage. But could they be a bottom 3 team next year? Yeah. And if they are, sweet, maybe you get a quarterback, or if maybe you feel comfortable taking someone else. But, in this position, I don't know if they're really going to be top 3, in that case, at least what we're looking at with the quarterback year next year, I think it's always good to look, okay, if we really need a quarterback, can we be top 3 next year? Obviously, that's not saying that's 100% foolproof in what you should do, but that's kind of my thinking is you can't just say, yeah, we're going to get Bo Nix here this year in a draft next year when we have no clue where guys are going to be. You can't plan for that. So I think being able to at least get someone here who doesn't need to start right away, which I think helps, I think is good value for someone or a team that, again, I know they have Derek Carr, but he was also just injured last year, and I really don't think that Spencer Rattler, who was an older prospect, showed much for you to be able to just say, all right, yeah, we'll keep him. So, honestly, the only quarterback scenario that I could kind of see would obviously be Cam Ward at 1 and then Sanders at 2, which, we can do later. But this is kind of what I think they should do, would be with him going up 14. Could trade back even farther, maybe, if a team is willing to do so. Or maybe we'll see, again, like we said, maybe the Browns just go ahead, or the Giants just go ahead and take him. could easily do that, but you've seen that other places, so thought we would kind of go here what I would prefer, as well as just having it be realistic and mix up for you guys. Number 15, the Falcons. This is a pretty easy pick for me. I'm going to go Mike Green out of Marshall. For the love of God, please take an edge rusher, Atlanta, or just a defensive lineman. I mean, please, specifically pass rusher. This one just makes way too much sense for the need value position. This is one of my favorite players in the class. Really glad he's been moving up the board after the Senior Bowl. Moved up a ton around where I would have him. So very good there. Dominated the Senior Bowl. Dominated for 2 years at Marshall. He doesn't just use his athleticism versus lower competition. He's actually got a lot of good moves like a dip, a rip, inside moves. He doesn't just lack in one area, which I think is ideal because sometimes you think of these lower school guys and say, okay, well, they're just more athletic. That's why they win. And that's not ideal guys you want in the draft. That's not the ideal guys you want just being a for sure starter in the NFL that you're taking 15th overall. Those guys would be kind of later on in the draft where they played lower competition, but they're either maybe not a great athlete, they had great production, or they are a great athlete, but that's kind of why maybe they got some of their production, and on tape they didn't really look like they had a lot of actual, technical skill. That's not Mike Green. That's not Mike Green at all. Falcons were literally the worst pass rushing team in the NFL last year. So I think you should definitely please go ahead and get an edge rusher because I think the value would be good here because it doesn't seem like there's going to be a lot going up. So it could also be a Donovan Izraku or a James Pierce Jr. or someone like that, a Michael Williams, Shamar Stewart. Falcons feel safe about D-line, so I will get the best one that fits their scheme, and that's going to be Mike Green. Cardinals at 16. This one was a really hard team to pick for. One, just because of what they need, but two, obviously if you're predicting, Cardinals, pretty hard team to predict just because of kind of what they do. They love their versatile guys. I personally am going to go off the board, not 100%, but a little bit. I'm going to go Gray Zabel out of North Dakota State. I think this could easily be defensive line, but they just have a ton of guys there, and I think there wasn't like one guy for me personally when looking that just totally fit in. So I think addressing it in round 2 would be best for Arizona. But I think this is a very safe offensive line prospect. Had good athletic testing. I think he definitely proves to be just a good player overall. Again, only thing is the arm length, as a lot of these guys are, but I think that's why he's perfect as an interior. I know it's his tackle. That's what he was at South Dakota State, but he will be an interior guy. But he can be guard or center. And if he needs to be tackle, like 100% needs to be, I'm not saying he can't be because we've seen guys with shorter arms succeed. It's just ideally, especially today's day and age, guys are only getting longer, bigger, taller, faster. He can still play tackle, but he doesn't need to be, and I think it'd be more likely that he's a really good guard or center. And it's a safe pick that they have and need. And to be honest, when looking at this team, they don't have as many, oh my God, you desperately need this position, kind of areas than you would think for Arizona. So maybe Arizona's a little bit of a climber next year. Who knows? They already were at 16 here, but I personally would invest in offensive line, and I like Gray Zabel here. I think he definitely is a first-round pick. Bengals at 17. Again, tougher to pick. This kind of middle was a little hard with these two teams, but I'm going to go ahead and go defensive line. I'm going to go Walter Nolan here out of Mississippi State. I've seen him higher than this in some, but I've also seen him fall out of the first round in other mock drafts. I think, again, obviously O-line is what you're thinking of and would be good, but in my opinion, the value just isn't there. Same with safety. Could definitely be a need. I just don't think the value is there. Defensive line has 2 reliable guys, but that's really about it. And defensive line is obviously very important. The former number 1 recruit in Walter Nolan, he had an amazing 2024 season. Good athlete for his size. Great Senior Bowl he had. And there's still room for technical improvement, which I do think you like. He kind of reminds me in comps to an early career Daron Payne, when Daron Payne was a really good player for Washington, a very good starting interior defensive lineman. That's kind of what Walter Nolan seems like. Run defense for Cincinnati was below average last year, and so with Nolan, who's pretty solid in both areas, but is a little bit more good as a pass rusher, I think he comes in and helps fill that a ton. They have B.J. Hill, they have Trey Hendrickson, but that's about it, and both of those guys are older, B.J. Hill being, and then the other one, Trey Hendrickson, literally almost left the team. So I think this would be a pretty good pick for them. Seattle here at 18, I'm going to have another trade. we're going to have another team trade up, and it is going to be, take a guess, the Houston Texans. I'm going to have them trade up from 25 to 18. They will be giving up 25 and 79 to go ahead and trade up a few spots to 18. And I'm going to have them trade up for Josh Simmons, tackle out of Ohio State. Again, some of you might be thinking why he didn't get picked to the Bengals here. Bengals really need more interior. Again, it even shows here. It says their team needs their guard. They could still do it 100%. But with the guys that they have right now, I think interior is like the biggest 100% need. And so some of those guys I think you can definitely find later on in the draft. Like day 2, I would have that for Bengals. But let's get back to the trade that just happened here. The Seattle Seahawks, I think, are open or should be open to trading down, as they, that's kind of the mindset I think they should have here. And Houston, I think, definitely wants to get the last actual first-round caliber tackle left on the board in Josh Simmons, because obviously they just traded Laremy Tunsil, which was a bit of a surprise. And it's definitely going to be something that we're going to judge their, kind of front office on, but it could be one that really pays off with how much money they had and how they feel he's really valued and what they got back. I think they tried to fill it with some free agencies, but only like Cam Robinson is probably going to stay the longest in terms of guys that they tried to fill in at tackle. Trent Brown they have at 32, but he's been injured. Blake Fisher was a second-round pick last year. He didn't show enough good for like being a sure, like, okay, we'll trust in this guy to be our starting tackle next year. But for Josh Simmons, I think he's a franchise pass-blocking tackle. He has that kind of potential. He had a torn ACL and only played 6 games this past season, but he was very consistent and looked very good when he was playing. He moves very quickly off the ball, which is something you really like. Athletic. Needs to be a little bit stronger. We're some bull rushers outside, but again, I just think odds are, he can at least improve that in the weight room, but it's good that he already has the good technique of just getting off fast, because that's what a lot of these edge rushers are. They're very fast. He's like, in my opinion, like a slightly lesser, probably a little bit of a tier down from like a Christian Darrisaw, which Christian Darrisaw is one of the most underrated players in the NFL and one of the best tackles in the NFL. And a guy who got injured for the Vikings, they traded obviously for Cam Robinson, and he wasn't bad, but they took a step down as a team. The Vikings did. And they obviously didn't. They went from being one of the best records in the NFL to not winning a single playoff game. And it was probably part in due to Darrisaw's absence. But Simmons, here, I think this is a good situation that he's not forced to rush in. He can kind of come off his ACL tear, and then would be an ideal, hey, we got a replacement here for cheaper, for longer, for Laremy Tunsil. And that's kind of the idea. The Buccaneers at 19. This one's a little odd. I know the D-line is popular here, but I do feel like they need this a little bit more. I'm going to go ahead and go Malachi Starks. I know you've seen him at 9. Obviously, the value pushes him down. I obviously don't have him maybe as high as they do, but I think at 19, this is fine. They did lose 2 safeties in free agency, and I think Antoine Winfield Jr. obviously is really good, but was injured last year and had the worst year of his career last year, which 2 years ago he had the best year of his career and was like one of the best safeties in the NFL. So I don't think you're going to say he's just going to suck again, but definitely losing 2 safeties and then having the Winfield stuff last year doesn't make you feel as good. And I think they could just probably use some help back there. Played a lot of slot, Malachi Starks did at Georgia, but also safety and in the box. Good speed, not crazy as an athlete, which is probably why I would have him falling, and maybe he falls even farther than this. Maybe this is too high. But he's a good tackler. I think he was better in coverage in 2023 than he was in 2024, which is good. High IQ, versatile, high floor kind of player, I think it is here. So not tied at the hip to this pick, but I feel like this kind of was a good fit because I personally do think they need some safety help. 20, Broncos. I'm going to have them also going offensive, or not also, but I'm going to have them kind of going offensive player here, just picking which one. And I'm going to have them going Amarian Hampton here out of North Carolina. I think they could wait if they want to at running back, but with their offseason moves, it feels like this is more so going to be the plan. They 100% need a halfback, but I do think Hampton is 100% worth this kind of pick and area, and I would prefer him way more at 20 than I would at 12. And yes, that is a big difference. But he's been very consistent. Ideal combination of honestly everything. I personally actually watched him in person a lot. Obviously, I go to NC State, so I was kind of a part of the media for NC State, student media for their sports, and so I went to the kind of season finale when NC State ended UNC season at Carolina. But I watched him in person, and he is that good. He is very good player, very consistent. He had less fumbles than Ashton Genty does, and he has than Ashton Genty did, and he has better size than Genty, especially for the NFL. I looked into some stuff of trying to find a good comp, and I do kind of like this one. I forget who had it, but like a prime Deuce McAllister for the Saints. A lot of comps there is what I seen, and his peak was like 1,600 yards back then and was like a MVP candidate. Wasn't going to win it, but that was kind of his peak, was that. I think maybe what Breece Hall's peak kind of is, not what he was last year, but just like a more consistent Breece Hall in terms of how, like, his peak. I think that's kind of what you're getting from Mario Hampton, which is objectively, for a good few year stretch, a top probable 8-7 running back in the NFL. So, yeah, this running back class is for real. I know I didn't mention it in the beginning, but the running back class is probably one of the best of all time. This defensive line class, very, very good, very deep. I do also personally like the cornerback class. I think corners have a great day two coming in. Receivers, really good day two. Maybe not top heavy, but day two, I agree. And then obviously quarterback's the kind of one that you look at as And then offensive line, there's a lot of tackles that might play guard. So the tackle value of guys who can actually stick at tackle is pretty, wanted or needed. Steelers at 21. There's a lot they could do here. Halfback, if they're here. Quarterback, obviously. But in my opinion, I think it really should be corner or defensive interior. And I think with the guys still available, I think I would just go with whichever Michigan guy you want, Kenneth Grant or Will Johnson. And I'm going to go Will Johnson with him still being here at 21. I think, yes, he could go earlier, but I think going later is very much a realistic thing. He had a great 2022. He was a starting corner for a great Michigan team as a freshman, like Derek Stingley Jr. was when he was picked really high and was a freshman great starter for the LSU Tigers, and then had some stuff with injuries and lesser play after that. And that's kind of what Will Johnson was. He was injured last year, kind of showed his lesser play a little bit, but he wasn't bad. He was just not as good. Seems to have maybe some speed questions, but his size and length are very good. He's a little poor in run defense. I think he needs to see kind of I would prefer to see him because he didn't really test at all. So I don't have as much of a strong opinion. So I would have really liked to see his long speed. And so with not happening, I understand how risky this pick is, but the value, like I said, of Will Johnson could be a Derek Stingley Jr. That's a possibility. I think maybe a little lesser than that, but that's kind of the possibility there. And with what they have, I really don't love their cornerback situation. Besides, I guess they did just pick up Darius Slay, but I think Darius Slay is like a Band-Aid. But I should address this kind of stuff here because there is absolutely quarterback talk and rumors here, for sure. Again, just with the Steelers specifically, I think offensive line could be there or running back. Hey, if Hampton Falls won, or they love a different running back, like they love Quinshon Judkins, Henderson, Caleb Johnson, someone like that, Scadaboo. Maybe they take one of them at 21. I doubt it, maybe. But the other thing that if it's not here, or if it's not running back, it might legit be quarterback. And that's just because there's been a lot of quarterback talk and rumors at this pick. I feel it's best to address it later and not in round one with this specific class. I think especially if there's a clear better person on the board than that guy, mainly because, if I'm being honest, I think I'm just kind of going based off the fact that Aaron Rodgers will be here. That's kind of my assumption. I think Aaron Rodgers is going to be the starting quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers. If not, it maybe goes to the Vikings, I guess. I don't know. But also, if not, he could be a retirement. So if that doesn't happen, I think this is probably for sure looking at quarterback, which in this case is probably going to be Jackson Dart. And I really wouldn't love having Jackson Dart as my starting quarterback coming immediately out. if I'm being honest, especially without an amazing offensive line. So that is a little worrisome for me. Or maybe we see a giant Steelers trade up for a Shedeur Sanders, or maybe they trade for, I don't know, I don't think it would happen, a Kyler Murray, or a I don't know, just a quarterback that you can think of that's not 100% tied at the hip with their team. Maybe has a new regime, maybe the contract they don't love, something like that. And having that be the case. Steelers are very weird. If I'm them, I think getting Rodgers would just be the best scenario, because I don't need to force a quarterback here at 21, and even if I do, they don't 100% need to start, because I will have Rodgers there. And if not, if I don't want to take one, then I can just get an actual good player to help out our roster. But we'll just, for this, keep it simple, we'll go Will Johnson here. And then Chargers, they're going to take the other Michigan guy that's available in Kenneth Grant at 22. I know it's a skills position player, is kind of popular for this team here, but with Kenneth Grant still being here on the board, I think they should definitely take him. Colston Loveland or Luther Burden would be good here. Those would be kind of the two I would look at. I think defensive line is just really lacking, but definitely more so with like actual depth for this team. I think Kenneth Grant is probably just going to be a guy that's like, he's just going to be good. I don't know how good. I have no clue, but he's just going to be a good player in some capacity, like a guaranteed second contract kind of guy. He's a great run defender, humongous size, especially compared to these other defensive interior linemen. Inconsistent from play to play, but game to game it does look consistent, which I know is weird, but on any given play, like you'll have one where he's just like, he totally could have done something and like actually was a net negative, and another play where he was actively a like total positive and just demolished somebody. So on any given game, it looks like he has all this great, consistent production. But just know it's not the case with him specifically. And that's not just him not doing something. It's him maybe being actively, crapped on or something like that. But he also actively craps on a ton of other people. I think he's also a good pass rusher from the interior, definitely more of a run defender. But he's got some quickness for his size. And I think he's kind of like a more inconsistent / like definitely a tier down from like a Dexter Lawrence. That's kind of what you're hoping with a Kenneth Grant here at 22. And obviously the connections with Michigan and Jim Harbaugh there makes some sense as well. So we'll go ahead and have that happen there. 23, the Green Bay Packers. Okay, so with this one's going to be kind of interesting. So I'm going to go ahead and go with a pass rusher. I'm going to go Shamar Stewart. I think with this, I think James Pierce, the Tennessee edge, is definitely a slightly better prospect, but I think Shamar Stewart fits this team more 100%. The Packers run a 4-3, and Stewart would fit in that kind of 4-3 defensive end mold way more than Pierce would. Pierce kind of has to be more of like a 3-4 edge rusher, but Stewart in general is also kind of a unicorn. He's more of a run defender than a pass rusher, but he can still be a great pass rusher in the right scheme. He's very raw in his moves, not great production in college, but a absolute God-given athlete, literally insane athletic potential, like absurd. I think he will be drafted at his potential peak, which could be even higher than this, which gives him obviously a high ceiling and a low floor. And that ceiling is like a Daniil Hunter / like a peak Jadeveon Clowney-esque, and his floor is kind of like a Marcus Davenport or a Joseph Osai. That's a starting defensive end. That's not a first-round pick. So, that's kind of what we're looking at with Shamar Stewart. Still, even his floor, I think it's still someone that you're at least solid picking or having on your defensive line. Obviously not the value, but that's why you're in the first round. First round, we see a lot of busts because we're drafting guys at what they could potentially be, because that's what you want to do. You want to get the guys that could potentially be amazing. In my opinion, I think it's not as balanced. I think there should be a balance of guys that could be really good, could be really bad, relatively equal, maybe a little bit less, with guys that are 100% going to be good, but maybe not as good as, or at least the peak of some of these other players. I think it should be a good balance. Slowly, I think it is becoming that as teams are realizing more and more how short their leash is to actually be a coach or a GM. But for the Packers here, who are pretty safe in their position, I think Shamar Stewart definitely fits more and would be a good fit pick there with need and the scheme. Vikings at 24. I'm going to go ahead. I know he's lower here, but I have him a little bit higher. I'm going to go ahead and go Derek Harmon here out of Oregon for the defensive line. I know they just signed Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave to 2 to 3 year deals on the inside. And safety is probably a bigger need, but I would prefer getting like a player here and not I would prefer getting Derek Harmon here and not just 100% relying on 2 30-year-old defensive interiors that were both injured last year and were both like down in their play last year. So I definitely feel more comfortable going this, and I would not be 100% certain in 2 of those guys. Like I said, both 30 plus in age, had a down year last year and were both injured. But Derek Harmon shot himself off the draft board. Amazing production. Former Michigan State Spartan, went to Oregon this past year. Great motor. Has shown great like pass rush and run defense production. Very balanced, which I think is something I really love. Only thing is he only has 1 year of production, but I mean personally, I think that could be seen more as like him finally hitting his stride than him getting lucky with where he was. Could be the case. We've seen both ways, but I think it's leaning more towards the him finally kind of hitting all the checks for his kind of player he wants to be. Good measurables and really good speed. Not elite in anything, but I think he's just really good. And he can play defensive end in their kind of 3-4 scheme that they have, kind of in between the tackle and the guard. So he'd fit perfectly as well. He's kind of like a modern day, but like slightly lesser, like Leonard Williams. That's kind of what he is. I think maybe a little bit lesser would be like a peak Daquan Jones, who was a starting interior guy for the Bills, who was like a good starter. That's probably his lower end. But Leonard Williams, I think, is the kind of peak that we could see from him. 25 with the Seahawks here. They are back on. I think with a trade back that makes this pick more valuable. I know they don't do this. I don't really care. They absolutely have to do this. And it's going offensive line. And I know it says 47, but I think he's definitely at least an end of the first round kind of caliber guy. But with the need that they have, I'm fine taking him here at 25 when you've traded down. That's Tyler Booker here out of Alabama. Look, they need to address the interior. They just need to. And I think here with most of the first-round offensive linemen going early, Booker's like the last one that I think is like actually worthy, specifically for the interior. He's the kind of last one I feel like good about being a potential, like, yeah, I could see him being a first-round pick, or worthy of being a first-round pick. Their interior offensive line is the worst in the NFL. And they can probably try to address it later because that's kind of what their GM likes to do is they think tackle or they think guard is not as valuable because they can just draft guys later on and they'll just kick inside to guard and it's a much easier position to find because there's a lot of guys that can play guard because the arm length you need for tackle is getting bigger and bigger because the defensive linemen and edge rushers are only getting bigger and faster, that a lot of the guys that maybe don't have that great arm length do kick inside to guard, so it's easier to find a guard. I do agree with that semblance, but you still need you need somebody. They really don't have any like good starters there. And I just wouldn't take chances to just say, yeah, we'll 100% address it later because you need multiple guys. You don't just need one or two. You need multiple. And I think guaranteeing that in between the second and sixth round that 2 of them are going to be 100% starters and then not taking into account injury, I just don't really love that. So I would go Tyler Booker here because with them having a new quarterback there, Sam Darnold, I know he had a great year. I think you really need offensive line. You really do. And tackles, I think they got some good stuff there. But interior, they need some help. Need some help there. So we'll go ahead and go Tyler Booker. The Rams at 25. This could be so many stuff. In this weird kind of scenario, we're actually going to go tight end. We're going to go Colston Loveland. But I kind of like this scenario with them grabbing him if he's still here. He's a great receiving future franchise tight end. Plays in line and in the slot, which I know McVay's probably going to love. Really good route runner. Knows how to play tight end, especially when improvising. A Higbee that they have has obviously been hurt for a while and is older. Colston Loveland has kind of like a Zach Ertz-esque kind of thing going on. I think they could look defensive back here. But again, I really like a bunch of day 2 defensive backs, so I would wait for that. Now, the Rams would probably need to trade back into day 2 if they want to get a defensive back, but to maybe snag a good one, but I still think there's a lot there. And yes, this could be a quarterback too, totally. One thing I actually saw that I wanted to mention in here last second, they invited quarterback Jalen Milroe to Green Bay to the NFL draft, which, for the just for us as kind of fans / people doing mocks, I mean, that probably has to mean there is something they know about maybe him going higher than we really expect. And he is not a guy who is going to start as your quarterback year one and you're like, all right, let's go. That is not what's going to be the case. So a team like, let's say the Steelers that maybe sign Rodgers but still draft a quarterback, or maybe they get Dart. The Rams are the first one I thought of like, okay, they could take him at 26 here if they want to, Jalen Milroe, or obviously it would be a team maybe doing a Lamar Jackson style thing where they trade at 32 or something like that and get the fifth-year option and take the quarterback on round one. But Jalen Milroe got invited to Green Bay, so I wouldn't be surprised if maybe he goes somewhere there, which would be 4 quarterbacks in the first round of a quarterback class that we're saying is not ideal. So if you're a team that got a quarterback, I think you should be at least on average feeling a little bit better. Not saying that the guys coming in aren't going to be good, but just the value that they have in this class, like compared to where they're going to be picked, it's just not as high as maybe other drafts like last year, for example. But we'll go ahead and we won't do that here. We'll go Colson Loveland. I don't think I would pass that up. Ravens at 27. This is where we're going to get the edge rusher off the board with James Pierce Jr. This would be very ideal for Baltimore, in my opinion. 3-4 edge, perfect for them. I think if they do kind of have some solid guys there, but no one really good. The best guy last year for them was a really old Kyle Van Noy, so you're going to need to find a replacement there. And even then, he wasn't like a stud. He was just good. So that was your best player at edge rusher. I think for James Pierce, he was projected number 1 pick like at the beginning of the season. Still had a great year, but not obviously as good. And then the more the draft kind of stuff goes on, the more mixed stuff we hear about him, but the more amazing stuff we see. His speed off the edge is insane. He's like in the 99th percentile for speed as an edge rusher in athletic testing. Long and lanky as well as a pass rusher. Great production. Was much better versus the run this year compared to kind of what was expected. I think he seems to obviously have the character/effort concerns, and some teams won't even have him on their board. But he is your pure speed pass rusher. He's like a Brian Burns-esque kind of player. Maybe not as strong, but that's kind of what he's looking like. And I think he would honestly go higher if his character and effort was not a concern. But I don't think you should put us from out of the first round. At least if I'm a GM, I would be willing to take that chance just because of the literal insane potential talent he does have. And it is 27. He could go much higher, but he could literally also fall out of the first round. I could totally see that. Next is going to be the Detroit Lions at 28. For them, I think I'm also probably going to go D-line, and I would go the best pass rusher available, and I would go Donovan Izaraku. And I do like this pick for them. I think they definitely need some type of other guy just helping off the edge on the D-line. And I would take the best one available. I know Micah Williams is there, or Nick Scorton. Both of those guys would probably work here. Not Luther Burden. Micah Williams, Nick Scorton, those guys would work here. Sanders and Alexander are interior. I'm talking edge. But I prefer Izaraku, and I agree. I think he is the better one there. Overall size is much shorter than normal, but he had great athletic testing, specifically in the 3-cone and the shuttle. Had a great senior year. Just a ton of moves that he had, which is something I personally like. I honestly really want to have him go higher, but it was just hard to find a place just because of value, and just I know some teams might not value his just slightly smaller than ideal size. But he's very polished, which is something I really love, and I think it would be a great first-round pick. But it's just a perfect scenario for teams down here that maybe need help off the edge, that are obviously had great seasons last year and can snag someone like this. He's a first-round pick talent for sure. I think he projects to just be at least a good starting pass rusher that you're not really worried about replacing, kind of like a Harold Landry for obviously formerly the Tennessee Titans, who was a long-term good starting pass rusher now of the New England Patriots. But Izaraku doesn't have to be kind of a lower tier 1 pass rusher. He's got obviously the insane guy next to him in Aiden Hutchinson. So I think that helps him a lot as well. Harold Landry also went to Boston College, so pretty easy comparison there for Donovan Izaraku. The Commanders at 29, I'm going to go ahead and have them go defensive back, but it's not going to actually be one of these corners. I was very close on doing it. I'll tell you that 100%. But this one was kind of influenced by like what I think the draft guys will end up doing. And I'm going to take Nick Emanwari here at 29. I think the defensive line obviously has a ton of people there, and I think that could definitely easily be the pick for this team. Again, Micah Williams, Nick Scorton, Darius Alexander, TJ Sanders, someone like that, I think could easily be the pick. I have no problem with that. But safety, I think, is low-key worse. So at least in my thinking, I'm like, why not go get this guy who literally absolutely blew away the athletic testing, blew away. He literally had one of the best athletic testing that we have ever seen. Ever. And that's not hyperbole, like ever. He is great near the line of scrimmage, a bit sloppy technique-wise. His athleticism definitely saved him at times, but, I mean, he's an insane athlete, so, hey, it helps. But when he was able to get some, like, gifts, maybe, like some potential poor throws, he literally took full advantage of it. Like, it was for sure going to probably come back farther than it should have, or maybe go back to the house, which it's not fully reliable, but, like, just the athleticism in terms of like him staying in front of someone, it can help catch up. Even he's that insane of an athlete, it can help him catch up even in NFL terms and standards. Is it a bit of a boomer bust pick? Yeah, for sure. I'm not saying he's a 100% guarantee, but I honestly prefer the latter happening with his athleticism as a prospect. I think the starting safety that they have is like Quan Martin and Will Harris, so they definitely need some help there. I think he's probably going to be used and can be used like a Jeremy Chin, former Panther. And I think he currently, I think he's still on the Commanders. Or no, I think he went to the Raiders, but was on the Commanders last year, and he can kind of fill that Jeremy Chin role, being in the box, going back deep, fits that a ton. Again, not saying you're stupid for picking someone else, and I could easily see them going a different direction, but I think he's going to go higher than a lot of people think. And I know it says 70 there, but he's going to go pretty high because his athletic testing was crazy, and in this specific case, I don't think it's that bad because it's at the end of the first round, and he literally had the most insane athletic testing ever, literally. So I do personally see it, and it's not like he was terrible. Like, he had good production. So we'll go ahead and go that for the Commanders there. And honestly, just as a last note for the Commanders, I think you should just go big or go home. Like, you're at 29, you have obviously this great quarterback. Maybe they or on a rookie deal, maybe they trade this pick for someone. Could totally do that as well, like someone more proven. But I say go get just a potential total stud. Like, separate yourselves to where you might actually reach that ceiling of being in / making the Super Bowl, or at least taking advantage of having a guy literally on his rookie season having like a top 5 quarterback potential season last year on his rookie deal. You got to take advantage of that as much as you can. So I say go big or go home for the Commanders for whatever they pick here. The Bills at 30. I am going to go ahead and, unfortunately, Bills fans, I'm going to have them trade out of this pick. Now, they did it last year. I'm not just doing this because they did it last year. But I do think it makes a little bit of sense just for their team. And I still think another year of doing that would help, especially when there is a team that might be want to trade up for a guy that they could also maybe seeing potentially gone, whether it's these 2 picks or they just want the 5th-year option probably specifically, and maybe the Chiefs or the Eagles aren't willing to trade down and give up that 5th-year option. But it's going to be the Cleveland Browns. I'm going to have the Cleveland Browns fans. You guys go ahead and get another pick here. It is going to be 33 and 104 for 30 and 169 just to have simple, easy stuff there. And I'm going to have the Browns go ahead and snag Luther Burden out of Missouri, the wide receiver. Yes, a ton to choose from for Buffalo. But I just, in my opinion, I don't think Buffalo needs to be there. In Cleveland, I think they want to trade up, like I said, to take advantage of the falling wide receivers and the 5th-year option. They could have a few guys they look here, but I really like Luther Burden. I think he's the best guy left here. And I think 30, like pick 30 would just be great value. I don't know if he's like 14, but I definitely think he's like a mid to in the 20s, like first round caliber player. They only have Jerry Jeudy, which yes had a great year, but I think they are close enough to be able, like the Browns being at 33, they're close enough to be worthy of actually not losing a ton to make this kind of move. And like I said, Jerry Jeudy's kind of it. He just Burden itself, he was kind of weirdly quiet this year or this past season, but it seems to be more like quarterback issues that was the case in Missouri than maybe him. And I think, just him as a player, like if we're going based off the 2023 stuff, he's not the 30th pick. He's just not. So I think this could be some really good value here. He was a former 5-star, played basketball, great athlete. He should be more aggressive, to be honest, as a wide receiver. That I feel like that's something that the teams can maybe teach him. But he has a very high ceiling as a wide receiver 1. I don't think his floor is that low either. Maybe a little bit for a first-round caliber wide receiver, but I don't think it's really as low as people would think. So, again, not sure why he'd be falling a ton, but it's just because of the production. And in this case, we try and take that into account a little bit. But I have a team trading up for him in the first round, and there have been some mocks that don't have him in the first round at all. He's kind of like a DJ Moore-esque. That's kind of what I view him as, like DJ Moore, which very good wide receiver 1. 31, Chiefs. I'm going to have them sticking and picking, and we're going to go Mike Williams out of Georgia. I think this team still needs help on the defensive line. They are going to go ahead and snag one of the youngest players here in Mike Williams. Very ideal size, really long arms, was injured at the start of the year and kind of played through it, so not as much production as you would think. But he's like your classic, like modern age Georgia edge rusher, was great defending the run, really strong, but hasn't shown a lot pass rushing. But he's very versatile because of his build and has the build to be a good pass rusher. Not a bad player at all, but will he ever be that kind of top tier pass rusher that we hope? That's kind of the question mark. He kind of gives me like Walker, like Trayvon Walker vibes a little bit. Except no crazy like combine performance and a little bit less pass rushing just because Walker didn't go in the combine, but he would have had a great kind of combine there. But I think he also has higher potential here too, just because of his versatility. And like we said, Walker went number 1 overall, and you're getting this guy at 31 overall. So not like it's a bad pick there or anything. I think his ceiling is like a Gregory Rousseau-esque, who's an edge for the Bills. His floor, a guy I found, Joe Tryon, who's like an starter. So big ceiling, big floor, but they do need edge rushing help, and I think with the ceiling, like first round, you're probably going to take that, especially when he might be lower just because he didn't test athletically. That's kind of the only reason why, and because he was injured. 32 for the Eagles. There's a lot of guys we could go here. Some of these guys obviously going to fall out of the first round. Emeka Ibuka, Golden could both go here at receiver. I think Golden probably will. It's just I personally wouldn't take him or find a spot for him in the first round. Guys I wish I did and I might do next round. Ravel from East Carolina. Trey Amos from Mississippi I've seen going up a lot. Nick Scorton feels like a good second-round pick. Xavier Watts is very safe. I just don't know if his safety is going to be worth it. Darius Alexander I'd be fine having in the first round. A few guys here. I love Iowa State players this year. I mean, just I don't know why, but all the Iowa State players I found myself to really like. Maxwell Harrison probably will go high because he had crazy testing, but I personally don't think he should be a first-round pick. Bunch of different guys we could go here. Maybe there's a crazy running back run. Who knows? But we are going to go ahead and snag for this team Landon Jackson, the edge rusher out of Arkansas. I won't press it yet because it'll close it off. But he's a very interesting prospect. He is really big, like huge guy. Was amazing versus the run last year. Pass rushing was kind of iffy. And then going into the combine and everything, I didn't really know how to feel about him. I wasn't 100% sure how I did. I personally would still not have him as a first-round caliber player, but you don't really need to have that as being the last pick in the first round. But the thing was, he tested phenomenally and athletically, and his size is crazy. He wasn't like a standout at the Senior Bowl or anything, and he doesn't really have a full pass rush plan, but the combine definitely lifted him up for me. And it's weird because I'm not a guy that tries to just fall all over the combine all the time, But I don't know. This one really bought me in, especially with his size. But this spot specifically I really liked, and just I never thought I would have Jackson going in the first round, but I just thought I would because I feel like this fits perfectly. Like, they definitely lost some guys on the defensive line in free agency, and they always refill, specifically early in the draft, because they want to get these guys. I mean, it's why they have the best GM in the entire NFL, but they want to get these guys that have all these high upside traits and surround them with guys to where they're not pressured to just go ahead and produce right away immediately. They're surrounded by some of the best coaches and the best kind of environment for the kind of defensive and offensive line in arguably the entire NFL. And he's essentially going to be Josh Sweat 2.0. Like, that's kind of his prospect profile as well. Like, both as a prospect and how he'll be used, because he literally is going to be on a team that needs to fill that spot. So I think it's just going to be great filling that role. This is one that I'm kind of proud of in terms of just what I thought of and kind of found. So Landon Jackson finishing off at 32 for the Eagles. Again, definitely different guys that could go in the first round here. Again, like I said, I could see all these here. Some of them I would personally put in. And then we kick even more down because we could have Jalen Milroe and Jackson Dart being in the first round as well. We'll get more mock drafts out later, obviously, and we'll do a 2-round mock draft next. But to end this off, Landon Jackson goes here to Arkansas. And we have a first completed mock draft here. Let me know what you think. Obviously, I will go ahead and reading all the comments as I do. If you have a stupid comment, I won't flame you, but maybe I'll show it in the next video if it's that insane. But just kidding, obviously. Go ahead and comment whatever you want. It's fine. But this is my first mock draft. Again, we'll have more content out soon. We'll also have NBA playoff stuff coming out, so keep an eye out for that. But mock NFL drafts coming up soon, so should be some good fun there. I always love following the draft. So stay smart, stay sharp, and I will see you guys later. Peace.